Before we dive in, here's another show you can enjoy in the True Story FM family of entertainment podcasts.
Horror movies get a bad rap. They're cheap thrills, mindless gore, not cinema, blah, blah, blah.
But we here at Sitting in the Dark know better. We know that horror is more than just jump scares and chainsaws. It's a reflection of our deepest fears, our anxieties, Okay, and there's a lot of jump scares and chainsaws.
Join us, Pete Wright, Tommy Metz III, Kyle Olson, and Keenan Diaz, as we cut into the dark heart of horror cinema.
Every episode, we explore a different facet of the genre, from survival horror to home invasions, from zombies to birds. We tickle the tropes, analyze the angles, and sharpen our own axes along the way.
We'll introduce you to the classics that shaped the genre.
And the modern masterpieces that are pushing the boundaries of terror.
Sitting in the Dark is your guide to navigating the terrifying, thrilling, and sometimes hilariously bad world of horror movies.
We'll help you understand why we love to be scared.
And maybe even convert you into a horror fan yourself.
So turn off the lights, close the basement door,
and join us.
Sitting in the dark.
In a world where podcasts are a dime a dozen, one show dares to stand out from the rest.
The Film Board, a podcast unafraid to tell it like it is.
We're here for one reason and one reason only: downloads.
That's right. We review new release movies because that's what gets people's attention.
But just because we're in it for the clicks doesn't mean we don't take our job seriously.
We're part of the Next Reel family of film podcasts, and we're proud of it.
Our reviews are just as insightful and thought-provoking as any of our other film podcasts.
It's just that this podcast is all about that sweet, sweet SEO.
The nectar squoze from the tree of Bing.
We're only human, but we're also creators.
And creators eat clicks to survive.
So if you want honest, unfiltered opinions on the very latest movies right on opening weekend,
delivered with the self-awareness of a team looking for downloads,
then tune in to the Film Board,
where every download counts, but yours counts the most.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Superhero Ethics. Today we're talking about Robin Hood. We're talking about heist movies. We're talking about why it is that the very ultra rich who help run Hollywood seem to love movies about stealing from the ultra very rich. And all of this got started because Riki Hayashi, while flying home from Japan, got to see the D&D Honor Among Thieves movie for the first time. And that just kicked off as we were talking about it, all kind of thoughts about stealing from the rich, giving to the poor, giving to yourself, giving to people who've been harmed by the poor, by the rich, and how all that fits together. So, Riki, let me just start by tell us a bit about what it was like for you watching that movie and kind of where it led.
Well, this was a rewatch, and it was after I got back from the flight.
Okay.
So I've always loved this movie, and because it is a heist movie. It's weird because it's also a D&D movie, very like sword and sorcery fantasy. But so much of the plot and so much of what's happening is basically just Ocean's 11. And I also love that movie. It's one of my favorites. I don't watch network TV anymore, like channel surfing. Mm-hmm. But when I did used to do that, Ocean's 11 was one of my, I guess I'm just stuck on this channel now when you find it. And as well as National Treasure, which is a bit different, but it still has a lot of the heist movie tropes going on,
right?
Even though they're not, stealing from the ultra rich, as you said. So yeah, D&D, Ocean's 11, The Italian Job. Like, I just love these movies. So I wanted to kind of explore what they were because we've had some heavy, to kill or not to kill topics recently, and this is still stealing is wrong. But there are interesting ethics going on, and it's not murder. So, yay.
Yeah, and that's definitely one of the things we're going to talk about. And just on the D&D movie a little bit further, I do think you're right that it really does hit so many of the tropes. And not only in that they come up with a plan, but then the plan goes wrong, and they have to come up with new parts of the plan and all these things. And we talk about in a way how Ocean's 11 kind of breaks that. But also this movie has the let's get the team together, and like there's reluctant members and they have to convince them, or there's a member who like they need to do a job for them and then they'll get them involved. There's a whole kind of side quest to go get an item that they need, very much like, you know, if you think about in Ocean's 11 where they have to go steal the electromagnetic pulse generator or whatever the heck that thing is. Like it has all these different elements and how it comes together, all wrapped up in a D&D package, which is a lot of fun. And as I was thinking about movies like this, like Ocean's 11, like Leverage, which is a TV show that I really love, that a lot of people mentioned in terms of this theme when I asked about it on social media, what keeps coming back to me is that these are all, I think, in some ways, version of the Robin Hood story. And so I wanted to start out by asking you, what do you think? Why do you think people, or maybe just you, love about the Robin Hood story? That idea of steal from the rich, give to the poor.
Well, I mean, that is the phrase,
Yep.
right, for Robin Hood. And I was trying to find out like where that phrase started, and it's not really clear,
Uh
like
huh.
what the originator is. But at this point, it just is Robin Hood.
Right.
It's part of the mythos, and I think obviously that resonates for certain people of a political alignment
Hmm.
because distribution of wealth
Right.
is a thing that we care about. And especially like as we get into like late stage capitalism, like the wealth gap keeps getting bigger and bigger.
Right.
So Robin Hood is a story from like the 13th century, I think, is the
Hmm.
original. If there was a real person, like that's when we think it was. Um, and like the stories start to get popular, I think, around the 15 and 1600s. So this is
Right.
really old,
Yeah.
right? And yet we're still talking about this kind of thing. Of course, back then, like it was feudalism. It was literally lords
Hmm.
who often like just owned people like slaves and serfs. So I think like that is always going to resonate as long as there is a wealth gap or an inequality
Yeah.
amongst classes.
Yeah. I think you're really right. And just a quick thing, you're probably right about when the story starts originating. The story is told as though it happens in the late 12th century because it's
Okay.
happening during the time of Richard the Lionheart and him being imprisoned in a way, and when King John is ruling. That lousy. I should have had the line, but King John the phony King John the phony King of England, as the great song will remind us. And yeah, I think it really resonates because of that idea of, I think people like it's fun to tell stories about outlaws, you know, and especially there's a kind of like danger to it, there's a sexiness to it, but also, you know, Robin Hood gets to give you everything because it's the you're an outlaw because the law itself is wrong. Like so often in the Robin Hood type stories, Robin Hood itself, but also all these others we're talking about, it's not just that the person is rich, it's that the person has gotten their money, gotten their riches through illegitimate means. They're taxing the poor far too hard, or they're, you know, stealing from people in ways, or exploiting things in some ways. And like, you know, depending on how left you are, and I'm certainly heading in that direction, um, it's easy to sort of see it as like, oh, okay, so anyone who's rich really should be a target of Robin Hood. But in actuality, like the Robin Hood stories themselves, there's a very clear understanding of no, no, no. King John is being unfair to the peasants, and this is why I'd mentioned the King Richard part, because like I think it's easy to think of the Robin Hood story as this is a story about the peasants rising up and saying we don't need a king anymore. But the Robin Hood stories actually end with King Richard coming back and everyone being super
Yes.
happy about that. And so it's not about like overthrowing the system. It's about saying, okay, we're okay with this general system, but there's only so much you can screw us. And when you go past the line, that's when we're going to fight back.
Right, because there are some versions or some historians who believe that the real, quote unquote, real Robin was actually a lord
Right,
who supported King Richard and was trying to send money to get him out, right?
right.
Or like raise money to form an army to get him out, or something along those lines.
Yeah, pay his ransom to
Yeah.
the Turks who captured him.
And the fact that John was taking that money and not using it for that purpose, but enriching himself is what
Right.
originally sets Robin down his path. So it's morphed a little more into Robin is like poor, or like the Kevin Costner version, like he's just come back from the Crusades, etc.
Right.
But you're absolutely right that it is not overthrowing a system, but actually supporting the
Right.
legitimate system. So to me, like this fits with some of the things we've been talking about with superheroes, where heroes uphold the status quo.
Right.
And Robin Hood, even though he's an outlaw, he's branded a criminal by those currently in power. He is trying to bring back what he believes is the legitimate status quo.
And I love that you mentioned that in these stories, some of the time at least, like Kevin Costner is the one I know best, but I think the Errol Flynn version might have this idea as well, that he is himself the son of a noble, and or a noble himself. And part of that's because then you get to have him be a much more dashing figure, and he knows how to sword fight in a way a peasant might not necessarily. But I think also it's an important part of the story because it's this idea that someone among the ruling class can be outraged at how that they can be a class traitor, that someone can recognize that their comfort is coming from the abuse of the common people, and they want to shift sides because of that. And I think that's a common theme in a lot of these stories. But the one that comes to mind for me first is Zorro, which is again kind of a myth. I think we know who wrote it originally, but I'm not sure about that. But it's a myth that comes out of when California was owned by Spain, and Zorro is famously a noble himself who recognizes that the peasants of California are being treated terribly, and so he starts doing the Robin Hood thing of stealing from the rich and taking down the rich in order to give to the poor.
Yeah. And of course, you get Green Arrow, Oliver Queen,
Yep.
who is literally, just comic book Robin Hood, is actually a billionaire owner of like Queen Industries or whatever it's called.
Right.
And yeah, I think originally probably Robin Hood was like a secret noble because in the end, he courts and marries Marion, and
Right.
he needed to be of noble blood in order to uh, validate that marriage, right?
Right.
According to the rules of the time. But I do like how it seems like that has been co-opted. His nobility has been co-opted in this way to be like, no, like someone at the top can care.
Right.
And maybe that's meant to keep people trapped in the system as well. Cause like we said, like he supports Richard and brings him
Yeah.
back. So it's like it's not like anything changed. Like we believe he's a more benevolent king, but he's still a king that's lording
Yeah.
over people.
Exactly. Well, and going a little further on that, like you mentioned how earlier we were talking about all this kind of dark stuff, and like we did a whole episode on vigilantism and murdering people who you think are wrong and evil and rich. And you know, Robin Hood is also committing a crime. He's a vigilante committing a crime, but there's no sense. Like to me, there's no moral debate really about, unless you're like really a bootlicker capitalist, of like, is it wrong to steal from the uber rich to give to the poor? Um, and I think it's because there's this real sense of, harming money, harming property, especially in ways that like you're not gonna like ruin this person's life, um, is just so very different than actually like doing physical violence against them. It feels much more harmless and so much more benevolent, and much more able for us to be like, yeah, that's fine. Like King John's a joke, so make him a joke, but this isn't killing him.
Yeah. And when we talk about all these variants of Robin Hood, I believe most of them do adhere to a kind of no kill rule. Even if it's not explicitly said by the
Right.
character or the story, the way it's depicted is like they stop a carriage full of nobles and then they steal all their jewels and gold and
Hmm.
then, leave them alive, right? And without
Well,
physical harm, as you said.
it's kind of interesting though, because you're right, they leave the nobles alone, but if there's some
The
poor
henchmen?
schmucks who are, yeah, they kill the henchmen all the time, and they
Yeah.
generally kill the Sheriff of Nottingham. So that might be a part in which it's actually really, because I think in most stories King John lives, but Sheriff of Nottingham does not,
Mm,
which is of
that's
course,
fair.
And of course, in some versions, like it's the Sheriff of Nottingham is much more the threat, and the point is that King John is too weak to do anything, you know. But yeah, I think and like so Zorro's definitely kills people. A lot of those stories, because I think the swashbuckling aspect is really important. And like honestly, it was one thing that the Green Arrow show that I loved always I thought was kind of a little bit eyebrow raising. Fighting people with your fists or a blunt object and not killing them seems difficult to do, but believable. Using a bow and arrow and a sword, I mean, those are pretty damn lethal weapons.
I don't know.
You
I
can
like
disable
okay,
people, but
I'm not a weapons expert, but especially arrows. Like yes, if you pierce someone in the heart or a vital organ, but there's in theory like it should be fairly easy to just like shoot them in the arm, which obviously will hurt and will have consequences. But it's mostly like incapacitation, right? Just reduce their ability to fight with their
right.
arms. So I do agree that a lot of these show violence in a way that you could believe that people are dying. But
Mhm.
I think that the motivation is not to kill in most
Yeah.
cases. It is to thieve and then like
Mhm.
overthrow the illegitimate government.
Yeah, there's often a sense of vengeance or of, being wronged, but generally it's that I want to humiliate this person, I want to steal all their money, I want to put them in a terrible position, not necessarily I want to kill them.
Yeah. And this goes to something we've been circling around, which is the MPAA, Motion Picture Association. Yeah, MPAA ratings of movies
Right.
and what people want the audience of their movies to be, and how like PG and PG-13 movies, you don't want your main character to just be on a murder spree, even if it is for a righteous cause. So like these kinds of movies, heist movies, depict crime, but usually not too violent of crime,
Right.
and the protagonists often adhere to no kill. Like one of my favorites, The Italian Job, the remake
Mhm.
version from like 2001, their mentor is killed by the villain. And part of the motivation for the heist is also revenge. Right? Like it's a heist movie because they want the gold
Right.
that they feel is theirs, but they also want revenge for the murder of their mentor.
Right.
And you would think that would be a situation that's ripe for we're gonna kill this guy. And they don't.
Yeah.
And like part of that is because of the construction of movies and the ratings. But I do like it's one of the things I like is at the end they win and they just let the guy get arrested for his previous crimes.
Right.
And that that says something about the protagonist and allows us to kind of be okay. I think it allows us to be okay with the lesser crime, so to speak, of just stealing.
Right. And honestly, I think that's a way in which heist movies are kind of drifting apart from the traditional Robin Hood myth. Because I do think, with the exception of the Fox in Disney's version, where in Disney the heroes never kill anyone, like most versions of Robin Hood kill a lot of people, especially the Sheriff of Nottingham, but also I think a lot of henchmen. And I think you're right. Often it's leaving them to be arrested. I think there's a lot of ones that I can think of, especially episodes of Leverage or Burn Notice, which is another one of my favorite like heist shows, where they don't kill a person, but they put them in a position where it makes them look like they've betrayed their criminal partners. And so they're probably going to wind up dead because of this, but our heroes get to keep their hands clean a little bit. But of course, with a lot of the heist movies, we keep the steal from the rich part, but like Johnny Ocean is not taking all the money he steals and giving it away. Neither of the folks I think in The Italian Job, or like often it's maybe to like you steal the money to help like your family or to help like your buddy who was killed, their family. Or just you and your family who are like all pretty destitute for one reason or another. So there's still some
Yeah.
sense of justice, but it has gone away from the like Johnny Ocean gets very rich by stealing all of that until he loses it again in the following movies and et cetera, et cetera. And a lot of the heist movies are similar. Do you think there's something interesting about the fact that like a lot of times we kind of let go of the give to the poor part, but still because people are stealing from the rich, we still love them just as much.
Yeah. First off, it's Danny Ocean.
Danny. Okay, thank you. I was saying Johnny. It didn't sound right.
Yeah, this was the thing that stood out in the D&D Honor Among Thieves movie, is
Right.
that they steal all the stuff and do redistribute it. And interestingly, they do so as a specific plot point.
Right.
And it is called out by the paladin character.
Right.
He's like, "Well, I can't help you, like, if you're just gonna keep all of that yourself. Like, you have to promise me that you're gonna give it back to the people of the city." And he makes
Right.
the main character promise that. And he even, like, doesn't want to, but then they have to use it as a plot point.
Right.
So
Because they.
that was very interesting that they go back to the Robin Hood and use it that
Right.
way.
Right. And yeah, it's sort of more a victim of circumstance. It's uh another kind of interesting version of this is if for people who remember the TV show Firefly, I forget if the episode is called "The Man They Called Jane" or Janesville, but
Oh, yeah, the hero of Canton.
Hero of Canton, the man they called Jane. And in that, one of the characters who we've known to be pretty much a scumbag, he's your buddy as long as you're keeping him paid, but he's willing to betray you. There's a town where they all think of him literally as a Robin Hood who stole from the rich and then threw this bag of money out to the poor. And we learned that he was trying to fly away and his ship was damaged and he had to get rid of weight. And so he had to
Mhm.
throw away the gold so he could escape. And I always thought that's kind of a fun take on it, where he checks the box of the altruistic act, but it wasn't altruistic in the slightest. It just has that effect at the end. Because the D&D movie does have that Robin Hood thing, but I don't think the Ocean's one do. The Fast and the Furious movies often wind up becoming heist movies. They're heists that involve an awful lot of fancy driving, but they're still basically heist movies.
Yeah,
Um,
Fast 5, which is the best one in the franchise. No
mhm,
arguments from anyone. Fast 5 is literally a heist movie, like the way it's constructed. I think
yeah,
that too is one of my favorites, and it's interesting because, well, okay, let's talk about the whole giving back
right,
problem or issue, because yeah, Ocean's 11, they steal from a casino owner, and you can make arguments about casinos and gambling and the legitimacy, but it's legal. Like
right,
his fortune has been obtained illegally, even if you might take issue with some of what's going on. So the other subplot in that movie is kind of revenge, like personal revenge, because Danny's ex-wife Tess is
hmm,
dating Andy Garcia's character, the casino owner, and part of it is he wants to take this guy down personally so that
right,
his ex-wife will come back to him and
right,
show like what a bad guy he is.
hmm,
So there are often like these personal stakes in the Italian Job, as I mentioned, like they want revenge for murder.
right,
And again, like that's a case where they haven't necessarily the bad guy hasn't necessarily taken from people, like,
hmm,
or stolen from people, so there's not this subplot of like stealing back and giving back. So
right.
yeah, the hero's often just like, well, I guess this is mine now.
Yeah,
And
often there's a sense of. I'm sorry. Go on.
no, that was the end of my point. It's
Yeah.
just like, if it's been stolen, if the money's been stolen, there's a give back that
Hmm.
money element. But sometimes these people are just like rich for some reason.
Right. Yeah, in terms it's kind of because I think part of the idea is that the Andy Garcia character, who, forgive me, I can't remember his name. Actually, I just said, because yeah, I think in the Ocean's movie, that casino owner, he clearly has done a lot of kind of unsavory business practices and is very much kind of destroying the kind of classiness of the old Vegas that they all hold on to. Um, but it's more just kind of the evils of gentrification versus the evils of outright theft and things like that. And in the TV show Leverage, which I really love, um, a lot of the times they're not necessarily stealing for themselves. They do get something from it and they do get paid well, but generally it's, like someone got rich in part by screwing people over, and so they're going to steal the money and give it to this very specific group that they stole over, or to and sometimes it's even you know one child should have gotten the family inheritance but didn't, and so they're helping like one rich person get the money back from another rich person. Generally it isn't that. But I think there's always some sense of like there's an injustice to be fixed, and some people who should have this money who don't, or who should have some sort of restitution for the terrible things that the company did. Like a lot of times it's a company where like someone died of unsafe practices or something like that, and then it got covered up, and so they're helping the victim's family or things like that.
Yeah. Terry Benedict is the name of
Terry Benedict, thank you.
the casino owner. And I think this is a good way to seg into the team aspect, because part
Mhm.
of the reason that Ocean is able to put together this team is because the target is Terry Benedict. Like he goes around and like people have gripes
Yeah.
against him. Like this guy wronged me. Like
Made lot
absolutely. I
he's
don't know if
made lots of
you
enemies.
get revenge. Yeah. And so yeah, like the phrase "I'm putting together a team," I think maybe originated with Ocean's 11. Not
Mhm.
not 100% on that, but it has become part of this trope, a part of this mythos of the heist movie, is that you
Right.
have to put together a team, and it's often lampooned. The phrase itself is often lampooned.
Mhm.
And I like it because to me it's like the same as the Avengers. This is the crime Avengers, right? Where you have to put together a team in order to fight the big bad.
Uh-huh.
And each of them brings something unique to the table in the same way as the Avengers. Like it's different because the Avengers have like this fighting ability, unique fighting abilities. But
Mhm.
for heist movies, you have to have the safecracker character.
Right.
In Ocean's 11, they need the acrobat character to inside the vault to do all the things and get past the sensors.
Right. The
And
grease
you
man, as
need
they call it.
yeah, you need various kinds of con men to play particular roles in the scenarios. And I think that to me is what makes Ocean's 11 so endearing and has become like this archetype for these movies, the modern versions of the heist movies, is it's fun. It makes it
Yeah.
fun to like meet these characters, and even though some of them end up being like one note, like you are the X for this movie,
Mhm.
and you don't get as much character development, it's still like it often gives you a chance to get to know them as they interact.
Right.
And I enjoy that about this. Like Fast and the Furious has ended up in the same place. Like the franchise starts as just like they all drive cars, right?
Right.
But as the series has gone on and they've added characters onto this team, they
Mhm.
all kind of have specialties now.
Yeah.
It has been very interesting to watch that develop over time.
I mean, long, long ago, this podcast did a series of episodes about the Fast and Furious movies. We might revisit them at some point. And I agree with you that Fast Five is one of the absolute best. I also think it's when the first Fast and the Furious series ends and the second begins, because really those movies take on a very different character. Uh, uh, once The Rock gets involved, and it becomes just a very different kind of movie.
Yeah.
But you're right. I
And
think that. Go ahead.
going back to the like King Richard of it,
Hmm.
the Fast and the Furious franchise has done the same thing. Where after that point, after Fast Five, I think in the next movie maybe they introduce Mr. Nobody, the Kurt Russell
Hmm.
character, and he runs like this shadowy covert ops organization,
Right.
government organization, like we think the U.S. government, but who knows, right? It's kind of like one of those we don't really know who he works for,
Right.
but he recruits the gang to help him take down like real terrorists. Like they are just, thieves still. He's like, this person legitimately is like trying to destabilize governments or like steal nukes. And I
Right.
need your help to stop them. And it takes like they are supporting the system, right? In that
Right.
case, they're outlaws, but they're supporting the system. So
Well,
it's
and
like very much the same as Robin Hood.
that's where I think we get into a whole other kind of heist movie, which is all, but I also think they're heist movies, which is to me the Suicide Squad type thing, where it is a bunch of outlaws, a bunch of ne'er-do-wells, a bunch of people who might otherwise not be heroes, although they certainly were heroes in the Fast and Furious movies, but they are basically faced with twin evils of there is this really bad thing out there that probably should be stopped, And then there's the shadowy government agency that is forcing them to stop it with the promise of, being punished for their past crimes being held over them. And sometimes you're right, it just becomes they're made into tools of the system. Sometimes, what they're working towards is to both stop the bad thing, but also somehow get one over on the people who have, forced them to do this. Burn Notice, I think, is very much a that kind of a story. And yeah, that takes on a whole other thing because it also has this idea of the villain with a heart of gold kind of idea, that the person who will they're out to protect themselves, but also when there's a bigger bad out there that's putting them in danger, they're able to realize, wait, there's a greater good here. I shouldn't just be out for myself. I should be altruistic in some way.
Yeah. The heart of gold phrase really, like, because it's similar to in One Piece, Luffy and his pirate gang. They're pirates. They're
Right.
outlaws, they're criminals, they steal, but they steal from the rich, like again Robin Hood. And there are elements where the world government in that story is corrupt.
Right.
So they are trying to, in theory, overthrow the world government. I don't know what's going to happen after that, whether they're going to replace it with something better
I mean, he
or
just
just
wants to be king. Like, he's gonna be his own king, so,
yeah.
who knows what that means.
But yeah, like pirate movies or pirate stories also take on
Mhm.
this element because there is, like, in the era of historical piracy, like governments were enlisting pirates to
Right.
uphold, privateers to uphold their national government or empire, right,
Yeah.
against other ones.
No, I think it's really true, and yeah, I hadn't even thought of it. All the pirate movies often fall into this kind of idea. Jack Sparrow is clearly, an outlaw and a criminal, but there's this idea that he's been wronged, and he clearly only wants the gold to, help himself. He wants to enrich himself, but he learns to care about others, sort of. And then, Keira Knightley and Orlando Bloom are along with him, and they get to have the more altruistic outlets. And from there, I have not kept up with all the different Pirates of the Caribbean movies, but I know that it goes 8 different ways in terms of who's the good guy and who's the bad guy and stuff like that.
It ends up with weird, like, fantastical elements with
Right,
Davy
we get
Jones.
much more into the Krakens of it all and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So,
I also wanted to
uh,
highlight how, because we both love Star Wars,
mhm,
shout out Star Wars Generations, how Star Wars has had several heist stories.
mm,
The movie Solo is just like a straight up heist movie in this genre. They put together the team.
yep.
Uh, Andor season one,
And
kind of
just
like
one thing on Solo, and it's very much about it has that element of they're supposed to be doing this just to get rich themselves while also getting revenge on the people they hurt. But then by the end of that movie, they come across a whole group of people who have been hurt by this and who are also trying to do noble work of fighting back. And they enrich those people instead of themselves.
yeah. Han gives, that's not the money, what is it called? Coaxium. He gives the coaxium to
Uh
Emphas
huh.
Nest, who
Right.
is a proto rebellion entity. And
Right.
then in Andor, you have the character of Andor literally joining the rebellion, or again the proto rebellion, to steal from the Empire so that they
Right.
can fund these groups, these rebellious groups.
Right. Yeah. I think we have a couple of heists in that, both because like a Prison Break is definitely a heist. And they do the same thing of like recruiting the team and figuring out who has what skills and all this kind of stuff. Yeah, and Star Wars is also interesting because we also get a number of those kind of like heart of gold scoundrels. Han Solo obviously being the first one, not just in the movie Solo, but also in the original A New Hope, but also Lando Calrissian, Hondo Anaka, who never fully becomes a good guy. He's always much more of a Jack Sparrow type, but he clearly develops a fondness for Ezra, and winds up helping the Ghost Crew and Rebels a number of times in ways that aren't necessarily like he always tries to like profit out of it anyway. But when Ezra makes sure he doesn't, he's just so proud of Ezra for backstabbing him back. Um, So he gets to be a fun version of that kind of like, he's just enough of a heart of gold. It's kind of like the lovable scoundrel instead of like a full-on villain.
Yeah, and I believe the Han Solo character, like the look of him, was
Mhm.
based on older Errol Flynn movies.
Yep. Yeah, he's very much kind of the rebellious cowboy type. So here's my question. We talk a lot about how one of the problems with getting certain kinds of stories told is that as much as there very much are artists in TV and movies, as much as there are in any kind of artistic genre, that a lot of these things, especially the bigger the budget, which happens with a lot of TV and movies, there is a profit motive. And to make it happen, you have to get funded by the people who have the big bucks, and which are often studios run by people who have either quite a lot of wealth themselves from being studio executives, or a lot of these studios are, directly owned, like a lot of the Amazon and all that is, it's owned by Amazon and Jeff Bezos and all that. A lot of these other companies are owned by others who have, big profit motives and stuff like that. Why do a bunch of rich people keep making money? Why do a bunch of rich people keep making movies about how it's okay to steal from rich people?
Bread and circuses.
Yeah.
Is the argument I would make. Is that it is a distraction. It is entertainment for the masses in order to keep them pacified.
Yeah.
You say, hey, like you can enjoy your heist movies, just don't steal from me. Don't pay attention to how I am enriching myself in
Right.
ways that perhaps are legal, but are certainly unethical in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and I think that goes all the way back to, because part of what got me thinking about this was wondering, like, why was this Robin Hood story not like stamped out, hundreds and hundreds of years ago? Since the story about peasants rising up against their king, or at least their sheriff, their authority, and they realized no, the King Richard of it all. The whole point of it is that they're rising up against an illegal, unjust authority, but that they end under a just authority, but still under a king. And I think in the same way, I think that is part of why we don't get as many like, I'm literally stealing from the rich to make things better for the poor, because it's not, I think now we have a better understanding of like just giving certain people money, making other people rich doesn't actually fix the systems at all. And like one of my favorite of these movies is a movie called Elysium, in which it's a futuristic world where only the rich people get health care, among other things. And the big ending of it is that Matt Damon kind of like cracks the computer code so that these robots that go around giving healthcare are now going to give it to everybody. And like that's a clear, like, he has made the system different in a way. And I think it's not really a heist movie in the same way. It's an action movie. It's a sci-fi movie. But I'm thinking about it, most of these heist movies, I think there's very little of that. It's much more often we're going to get rid of this executive, we're going to get rid of this rich person and make someone else rich. Or a couple of
Or
or at least a
or
couple other
bring back
people.
the old one.
Yeah.
Even in D&D, Honor Among Thieves, they get rid of Lord Fitzwilliams, the Hugh Grant character who has become Lord of Neverwinter, again through illegitimate means, through sorcery. And at the end of the movie, in like the not post credits, but in the summary at the end, they're like, and then like once the evil sorcerer was gone, the legitimate Lord Neverwinter reawoke from his slumber and like
You're right.
returned to power.
Yeah, it's literally just getting back to the status quo.
Yeah. So like they did give gold back to the citizens, but then things return to normal. And again, we are led to imply that normal is okay for these people. But it's still like, if you think about it from a modern perspective, it's like, well, he's still the Lord. And like, what does that mean? Like, did you elect him? Actually, I think they do mention that there were elections, because Fitzwilliams says like the sorcerer helped him get elected, I think.
Right. But I think it's meant to be like there's a council of nobles who
Yeah.
elects him, not that it's like the people themselves by any means. Yeah, you're right. It's one more of these where the end result is that we keep the status quo instead of actually trying to do real change. I think it may sound like we're kind of crapping on these movies and being like, oh no, they're not really revolutionary at all. And to some extent, I think that's true. Like, I don't think, many people like I think there is media out there that is incredibly like helps people see injustice and leads to new changes and things like that. I love Bob Dylan because I know like his effect on the him and Joan Baez and so many others on the anti-war movements. And um I just finished the newest Hunger Games book, which feels very much aimed at this exact moment. I really hope it's going to open some people's eyes. And I'm saying that I don't think heist movies necessarily are that, but they certainly can be. And I think like Leverage definitely like pushed the bounds of that a lot more than I think a lot of these movies do. I think that there's others out there as well that are kind of, trying to push a little bit more towards not just being about let's let someone else get rich and sort of have a fun moment of the rich man gets embarrassed and loses all his money, but are actually more about, like, hey, how can we actually change the system? How can we make things better?
Yeah. And it's so interesting to me, Ocean's 11 being this archetype. The series continues, and then in
Mhm.
Ocean's 13, they actually team up with Benedict, Andy
Yep.
Garcia's character. So it kind of becomes a thing I was telling you about Dragon Ball, where your previous enemy, arch enemy, like you have to team up to take on the bigger evil.
Right.
Like there's always a bigger evil, I guess.
Yep. Yeah. So every
And
chapter you get the former villain on your side, and now you do the next round.
the Fast and the Furious
Hmm.
absolutely has done that. You mentioned The Rock, like he starts out as an antagonist, a lawman who's trying to arrest them, but
Yep.
then like in the next movie he becomes their ally, and like they continue that for pretty much the rest of the series.
Right.
Like a previous villain like joins the crew in the next movie.
I mean, that was the whole point of the first movie, was that a cop who was there to try to bust their
Yeah,
their
yeah.
their criminal ring, eventually gets kind of like, falls in love with someone in the family and gets recruited into the family and turns his back on the law.
Yes, the family.
Yeah,
Family.
family is an important thing. Do a drinking game of every time that Vin Diesel says the word family in a Fast and Furious movie, you'll be very drunk by maybe 20 minutes in.
Don't do that.
I do want to say a quick thing. I mentioned that I just finished the new Hunger Games book. It's only been out for like 2 or 3 days, and frankly, the only way I was able to finish it so fast was because I had it as an audiobook. I love reading, like, actual books or books on my Kindle, but for me, it takes a lot more time, whereas I can listen to an audiobook when I'm washing dishes, when I'm working out, when I'm doing all these kind of around the house things. And from the minute I started this new book, both because it was just so engaging, like a lot of the Hunger Games books are, but also because a lot of people who I really love hearing from and commenting on had also rushed through it. They were talking about it on social media. I wanted to get into those conversations. So I was able to do that on audiobooks. And so wanted to give a quick plug for Audible. Audible is a leading way of getting audiobooks. One thing that's really cool you can do is if you buy both the audiobook and the Kindle version, which is a little more money for sure, but sometimes they offer like package deals. The two will sync up so that I could like read a chapter in my book and then need to go do some chores or no, go on a drive, switch to the audiobook version, and the audiobook would immediately find where I was in the Kindle version and start me from there, and then vice versa when I was back on my Kindle. So I was really happy that version exists. And of course, if you're wondering why I'm suddenly praising it, it is because we ourselves are trying to be dirty, dirty capitalists, or at least, help pay for our sound equipment. Um, uh, in the show notes, we are sponsored by Audible. If you sign yourself up for 1 year Audible subscription, I think you get the first 3 months free, and then after once you start paying it, we will get a little bit of that back. Helps us support the podcast, helps us to pay for things like the sound equipment and all the things that are needed to make this podcast possible. You get a good deal, we get a good deal, and you don't have to worry about the fact that you're not able to like physically hold a book or a Kindle in front of you to be able to consume these great stories. So definitely please check that out. Now back to a regular scheduled programming.
So one of the things that I kind of came across in this discussion was the use of the name Robin Hood in
Mm,
modern culture.
yeah,
Like it's become so iconic that you can just say Robin Hood and people know what you mean. Like they know that phrase, steal
right.
from the rich, give to the poor, right? And one of the things I came across was that there was a tax. I think this was in Europe, European Union, they tried to implement a financial transaction tax, and they called it the Robin Hood tax,
Yeah.
and had marketing around this. And I just find that fascinating. And they even have like the logo for this. It's green
Mhm.
because
Yep.
green is the color associated with them. And there's an arrow. There's an arrow going through it. So like they're just full on leaning into this
Uh-huh.
Robin Hood and
Yeah,
using it as part of this marketing.
and I don't know if it's ever officially part of their programs, but that idea of a Robin Hood tax was certainly discussed by both Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders as part of their presidential campaigns. And I'm so glad you were able to mention that version because I think that Robin Hood is so part of our culture that it also goes all the way to the other end. Because for those who engage in cyber currency stuff, Bitcoin and all that, one of the leading providers of it out there is
Yes.
It's like robinhood.com or Robinhood Bank or something like that. And the more we learn about crypto and, I, I think they're very much presenting it as here's a way that you peasants can become rich, that we the poor can become rich quickly, um, without necessarily stealing it from anybody, but that somehow the money is just generated. We can paint with a bit of a broad brush of all crypto. There's certainly an awful lot of it that is Ponzi schemes and that is basically ways of like defrauding people out of money. And so the idea of something that is like quite likely a lot of money going from the poor to the rich being under this name of Robin Hood, it was just like, wow, that's this term really can mean anything these days.
Yeah. If you have the marketing and you just like stamp Robin Hood on something, you that's what they're doing, right? They're using the name and the mythos to present a certain image.
Right.
And obviously, like to some degree it works. And if you think about it, to some degree it doesn't. But I think it's more effective than just calling your company like crypto exchange or something, which is descriptive but like meaningless in a certain
Yeah.
sense. And calling your company Robinhood is I hate it, but it's brilliant marketing.
Yeah.
In
It
the
really
same
is.
way that this financial currency tax, like the Robinhood tax, like you
Mhm.
immediately have an association and know what they're getting at.
Right.
And sometimes that's all you need. Like I haven't like dug into all of the details of the tax. Like in theory, like I
Mhm.
like it, but just a surface reading. But it's hard to say, like, with all of these government things, like, whether it's being done properly and where's that money gonna go, et cetera, right? So, by using that association, you can kinda, like, get past stage 1 of people's defense mechanisms,
Right. Well,
but
and
we
even like
still go ahead.
we mentioned the TV show Arrow, you know, the word Robin I don't think is ever used to describe that character, but he's described as the Green Arrow, the Green Hood, and like the just linking the idea of the hood, the arrow, and green together.
Yes.
And you don't need like when I then found that he was someone who was trying to mostly hurt the rich people because they had hurt the poor people, like I was not surprised in the slightest. I was like, yeah, of course, this is a version of the Green Arrow story of the Robin Hood story. That's pretty clear.
Yeah,
Well,
and on that show, he's much more violent than most other depictions of Robin Hood, I think.
again, I'm going to challenge you on that. Other than the Fox Disney one, not Fox the broadcasting company, but the literal Fox Robin Hood. Can what's a version of Robin Hood where he doesn't kill a lot of henchmen?
I mean, okay. So the most iconic to me is the Kevin Costner Prince of Thieves.
That hurts
And
my soul, but you may be right. Yes.
I mean, that's just my generation. Like,
Uh-huh.
and in that movie, I if you rewatch it, I don't know how many people die, like literally die.
Right.
Like he certainly shoots lots of arrows and there's lots of sword fighting, but how much of it is lethal? I don't know. Get the Dead Meat channel to do a
Mhm.
kill count on it.
Right. Yeah, I'm just taking a quick look. He definitely kills the Sheriff of Nottingham. His partner Azim kills the witch Mortiana. Um,
Right, so those are the primary antagonists. I forgot there
court
was a witch. Wow.
according to his website, All Out of Bubblegum, which does studies in this kind of stuff, he kills 16 people, and
Okay.
Azim kills 13. So I
Fair enough.
I'm not sure I want to watch it again, although there's a lot of good parts to it. To be sure, the Alan Rickman as a Sheriff of Nottingham is just absolutely brilliant casting. But yeah, but either way, I see what you mean. He definitely does like let a lot of nobles live.
Yeah, and just like talking about the show Arrow. When I say violent, I just like that came up in this era of like post Batman
Yep.
superhero genre where everything superhero kind of got like darker and grittier and more violent and more visceral.
Yeah.
And so like again, it's a TV show, so I don't know how much actual murder or like killing is depicted, but he is like more personally violent, I felt.
Right. In the first season, he kills a number of people, and then he tries to adopt a no-kill rule in the second season, and then that comes up a lot as an issue for him. So, well, this has been a fun discussion. I think as our bonus content for members, we're going to spend a few minutes talking about our favorite versions of Robin Hood. But of course, we want to know what you think. What are your favorite versions of Robin Hood? What are your favorite heist movies? What are your favorite versions of these Robin Hood type stories? All the ways to contact us are in the show notes. And there's also, as I said, the way to get an Audible subscription, or of course, just to become a member. As a member, you get $5 a month, $55 a year. You get free content at the end of most of our episodes. You get full free episodes once a month. We just did one on the topic of violence and non-lethal violence or less lethal violence, and both the ethics and the practicality of all of that. And you get ad-free content, and of course, you just get to help us keep the lights on, which is a huge help, and hopefully makes you know that you're part of helping get these podcasts made. So please think about becoming a member. For everybody else, thank you so much, and we have spoken.